Hi, this is Carol Wisely with Radio Free Decipher, beginning the first of two interviews with Tom Braunlich and Rollie Tesh. Let's start with you, Tom. First of all, introduce yourself to all our Radio Free Decipher listeners.
Well, I'm Tom Braunlich, and one of the designers of the Star Wars and Star Trek game, but plenty of the other products for Decipher as well.
And outside of Decipher, you've been a game inventor how long?
Approximately 20 years now, I guess. Got involved early on with a game called Pente, which was a strategy game that was very popular in the early 80s. And I had a master's rating in chess and just kind of stumbled into the game business.
Great. And Rollie, introduce yourself.
My name's Rollie Tesh, and I met Tom in high school, and he then got me hard at Pente as well. And although I don't have a master's rating in chess, I still beat him most of the time.
He has
an expert rating, is very good too.
All right. He's also beaten me at virtually any game I've ever played against you, Rollie. Acquire is one that I remember distinctly.
Risk is my fondest memory.
Yeah, you beat me at Risk too. That's a game I've been playing for more years than I care to remember. Still not well, though. So, you guys met at high school. Where was that?
In Tulsa, Oklahoma, at Booker T. Washington High School, which was the first voluntarily integrated high school in the United States. And we both came there from different parts of town and just happened to meet because we played chess.
Ah, so were you in like the school chess club? Cool. No CCGs back then, I guess.
No, those were the old days, the primitive days.
Did role-playing exist at the time?
I think Dungeons and Dragons was popular at that time.
Yeah, Dungeons and Dragons. I didn't play that very much, but I had some friends who did quite a bit, and I sat in a couple times, but that was not a big thing at our school.
So it was more chess. So what got you to Pente? Were you Go players?
No, not really. It was just by accident that we got involved in Pente because the game was developed at Oklahoma State University, where I was going and where Rollie was living at the time, and the inventor was looking for experienced players to develop the game, fine-tune the rules and so on, and he turned to us because we had some experience with those things.
Playtesters, in fact. So now, who's the inventor of Pente?
Gary Gabriel.
And is he still involved with Pente?
Yes, he's living in Boulder, Colorado now. And in fact, we just had a reunion tournament recently to promote the new 20th anniversary set that Decipher's doing.
Ah.
Tom and I traveled back to Oklahoma to play in the tournament.
Who won?
Bodo Kanzi.
There's a guy from Austin, Texas, who's been studying for 20 years, and Rollie and I, of course, we just were
winging it.
Yeah, we were winging it. We had a great time, and actually, I thought we did pretty well considering, but he came very well prepared and defeated us both.
Well, it's a great game, Pente. I've played it at many a toy fair in between customers. So Decipher's done that, and those of you out there who know Pente, it classically comes in a long red cylindrical tube. I think at various times we've done a black tube version, and now we do a 20th anniversary version, which is in a flat box that you'd see in Toys R Us. So,
and there's the red tube too.
Yeah, I just mentioned that.
I need to listen more closely.
Just teasing, Rollie. Okay, so you got into the games business, and so you guys were professional game designers, which always fascinates people, and worked with Pente for a while. When did you first meet Decipher?
Warren Holland, who's the president of Decipher, had developed over here in Virginia his product called Decipher, which was a coded jigsaw puzzle with a $100,000 prize to anyone who solves it. And he showed it to Gary Gabriel at Pente Games, and Pente sold that for a while. And so that's how we initially met Warren. And then a year later, Pente was sold out to Parker Brothers, and Warren took his own game back and started his own company. So we've known them ever since.
Oh, ways back. What was the first Decipher product you worked on?
What was the first one?
Well, not counting Pente, which Decipher now sells, I think the first one was No Dice.
That's right.
Which was a typically it was a game that we sold to Decipher, but it wasn't our invention. It was an invention of a friend of ours, professional inventor who lives in New Jersey, named Jim Winslow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've met Jim.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and we've worked with him on a lot of projects, but it's kind of typical of the things that Rollie and I do because we know a lot of inventors around the country, and we kind of work together on a lot of projects.
That was mainly Tom and Jim Winslow, and it was a strategy game, but it had the feeling of being a dice game.
Uh-huh.
There was no luck, but it still had that feeling. It was really cool.
Yeah, it was called No Dice because it felt like backgammon. It had an element of randomness in it, but there was no dice in the game. So I always liked it, but it's not on the market anymore.
Well, there's many good games that are not on the market anymore. So then, what was the next? Did you work on the Star Trek mystery? How to host a mystery?
No, but we did the VCR game.
Ah, the Klingon Challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how the whole Star Trek thing started. That eventually led into the CCGs.
And that would have been back in about 92 or 3, I guess, the VCR game, yeah. So then you worked, then you guys were based in Seattle at the time, and I guess that's how you came across Magic the Gathering.
Actually, we heard about Magic from another inventor on the phone. It was a coincidence that we happened to be in Seattle, where the inventors of, or the marketers, WotC was located. We met with them a couple of times and learned more and more about CCGs, and realized that if we got a good license like Star Trek, and did essentially the same thing, but with an original gameplay system, that we would have a natural.
And Star Trek then came out in 94, I think. Yeah.
Late 94.
Yeah. You guys big Star Trek fans?
Yeah, huge. I'm not necessarily a Trekker, but we certainly had to become Trekkers to design this game.
I've never worn pointed ears or anything.
So you worked on Star Trek, which at that time was just based on the Next Generation, I believe, because Deep Space Nine was just a future thing to happen, and Voyager, and the original series was way back in the past, and the current was Next Gen. So what do you remember from that process?
Well, from my point of view, it's all a blur, right? That was long periods of time where we were delving into each of the episodes and pulling out things that would make cards and trying to fit them into a system. It just seemed to take forever.
Where did you guys came up with the concept, the basic concept of, how would you describe the basic concept of the Star Trek CCG game in a sentence or two?
Well, I think the essential element of all of our CCGs is that they're location based. So you have a feeling of being inside the world. And then the characters and starships move around within that world.
And the whole mission-solving dilemma thing, which I've always thought was such a great aspect of Star Trek, because it's so similar to the episodic nature of and serial nature of the property.
Right. The goal was to try to simulate the feel of Star Trek as much as we could, and certainly the way every episode involves going to a new planet and having some kind of dilemma that you have to overcome was key to the series. So we tried to integrate that into the play, and with the idea of dilemma cards and so on.
Great. And then when did you start working on Star Wars?
I think about a year later. Warren was in discussions with Lucasfilm for quite a while before it was actually committed to, but basically the following year we started working on Star Wars 2.
And was that a very different experience? Were you still on the West Coast at that time?
I think we moved to Decipher, to Norfolk, where Decipher is located, about 3 months before. Yeah,
as soon as we found out we were going to do Star Wars 2, we realized that we had to be here in Norfolk. So
yeah, because there's stories of 8-hour-long telephone calls between Decipher and the West Coast.
And in the early days, it was just Tom and me and Warren, and Dan and
Ross, I guess.
And Ross. So it was very long days for a while until finally Jerry and Bill and all the other fantastic staff came aboard and started taking the pressure off us.
Yeah.
So you worked on the classic game right up and, you still work on the classic game, do you, to a certain extent, or you moved on to other things?
Well, we like to work on it more than we do, but starting a year and a half or so ago, we started working on the new Episode 1 stuff, and have been pretty much out of the more recent Star Wars things.
Tom and I are essentially the conceptualization. We come up with the original ideas and then turn those over to people like Bill and Jerry, who are so good at implementing the ideas and fleshing them out.
So let's go back to Classic for a moment. What was the breakthrough in Classic? What was, when you were designing the concept of Classic, what do you think of as the breakthrough moment?
I think we started with the idea of each player having a base that you were building up and the opponent was trying to destroy. And then Tom had the idea at some point that what if it was the deck that represented the base? And then it clicked with us that what if the deck was just simply the scoring device, because we were wanting the game to be completely self-contained and elegant, and the cards themselves could act as the scoring devices.
So the whole concept of the flow of the Force grew out of that, which is so integral to the Star Wars game.
Right, and that when you lose your deck, you're out of Force and you're dead. And then on top of that, though, I think that the most interesting thing was how we arrived at how you manipulate your Force using a used pile and a Force pile, which I've said this before, but when you go to a tournament now and you see people just manipulating those cards as like it was the most natural thing in the world, we spent weeks and weeks trying to figure out how that would work and went through a lot of different versions.
Oh, it must be amazing, because that gets so fast it's a blur sometimes. But yeah, I mean, it really is, you know, having been involved in promoting and teaching that game, that once you get that over and you see the expert players, they are aware of every last card in that.
It blows my mind how somebody will show a card for just a split second, and both players immediately know what the ramifications of that are.
Yeah, and also where their destiny draws are. That's the other thing. If you play against an expert, I've pretty much found they absolutely know what they're going to turn up for destiny, you know, once you're a little way into the game. And I don't have that kind of card memory, so it's just as likely to be a location as it is to be a 6 for me. So that sort of messes my plan up most of the time. But
yeah, it's funny, when we were developing those systems, we thought, you know, a really good player ought to be able to memorize the order of his cards after a while.
With the last few cards, at least. We were worried about that for a while, in fact.
Yeah, then we thought, well, if they're that good, you know, they deserve that advantage.
They're that good. Oh, they are that good.
I don't think we ever really expected them to be able to do that consistently, though, but apparently they do.
Oh, and many cards have been developed that play on that. I mean, you know, there are many cards that people play just to put a card back in to the destiny flow at the right time, and that's become a really big strategy. So
that sounds like one of Jerry's ideas.
It's a great one. It beats me every time. And what about destiny? When did that concept arise?
Oh, that might have been the very first thing. I wanted there to be some kind of random element in the game, like dice, but we wanted the game to be self-contained. So it was just the idea of putting numbers on the cards to represent the dice seems so natural that I don't understand why everybody's not doing it.
Well, you know, there's many CCGs out there with many game mechanics. So I think the Star Wars Classic game is a beautiful game system. It's very rich now, because I think we're up to 1,800 plus cards, and that gets very fascinating and challenging to control everything that happens. Thanks, folks. In my second interview with Tom and Rollie next week, we'll get on to the subject of the work they've done on our new Episode 1 game, Young Jedi Collectible Card Game, which will be out in a few weeks' time. For those of you listening who've made it through this interview waiting for news on Endor, I don't really have any yet for you, although it's looking increasingly like Endor will be out at the beginning of June, and Blaze of Glory some time after that. Don't have any more firm dates than that, so hang on in there, and be talking to you next week.